The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
While we all work towards a new normal in the current environment, working, meeting, and learning virtually has become even more valuable tool. We are pleased to announce our 2020 webinar series and look forward to seeing you each month. This year's webinar series will focus on the whys of insurance. LLIS offers many insurance solutions for fee-only financial advisors and their clients. We understand that with many options comes many questions. This year, we'll tackle the whys of insurance. Each webinar will last about 50 minutes, and you must be logged on for a full 50 minutes to receive CFP credit. Please be sure to ask questions as you have them by typing them into the questions box. We'll do our best to answer them as they come in. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website within a week in case you missed it. And throughout 2020, the Only Financial Advisors will have the opportunity to earn 9 CFP CE credits. Kicking off our 2020 webinar series is a presenter who has been part of LLIS since 2009. She handles many of our clients' cases for life, disability, long-term care, and annuities. And since 2014, she has been supervising our very busy new business team. And here is Jennifer Stiles.
Thank you, Claudia. Many of you or your clients may actually think now's not a good time to apply for insurance with the COVID pandemic, and that's not necessarily true. Insurance companies are actually running at normal capacity as they are considered an essential business. The exam companies are also running at 100%, with the exception of a few counties in the country. In fact, some companies have relaxed the exam requirement due to COVID, so now may actually be a very good time to apply for insurance. Today, I would like to talk about the application process, in particular, the underwriting process and what the underwriter is looking for when it comes to assessing risk. I'll address how some companies have an accelerated process, and they've had that for a couple years now, but it's particularly helpful now with COVID. And we'll also go over the policy delivery process and address how technology has changed this industry. For those of you who have referred clients to us, you know that we ask a lot of questions up front. The reason for that is that we work with so many insurance companies and they all have different underwriting guidelines. So we like to get as much information up front as we can so we can do our pre-underwriting to make sure that we're recommending the best company at the lowest premium for that particular client. But instead of spending too much time on the quoting process, I would like to jump right into when an application is submitted to the insurance company and the steps involved in underwriting. So as you can see here from our quote request, we do ask a lot of questions. Once an application goes to the insurance company, this is where underwriting actually begins. These are the items that the underwriter is going to review to assess risk, and we'll go into more detail with each one of these and address how some things have changed with the COVID pandemic. Now, the underwriter is going to review the application, they'll review the exam, they'll order the motor vehicle report, they'll run the client's name through the Medical Information Bureau as well as the prescription database, they'll order medical records, they'll review some financial information, and an additional phone interview may be required with the insurance company. So this underwriting process can take about 2 to 3 months before an offer is actually made. Now, a lot of people think that, I'm super healthy, I should get the best rate possible, right? And health is a big part of assessing risk, but there are actually other areas too. When assessing risk, the underwriter is looking at lifestyle habits, medical history, of course, financial information, as well as family history. And we'll go into details about each one of these. Now let's take a look at lifestyle underwriting. What does that really even mean? Well, they're looking for hazardous activity. Do you skydive? Do you scuba dive? Do you fly planes? Now, a typical pilot who flies a large plane for like Delta, they typically are eligible for Preferred Plus if everything else qualifies for that approval. But when it comes to aviation, we're kind of looking for people that are private pilots flying the smaller planes. And the reason being is those large planes, they pretty much fly themselves. The majority of plane crashes occurred due to human error, as we just saw this year with Kobe Bryant's helicopter crash. So if somebody flies a private plane, that's where we really kind of need to dig and get more details on that. And it can affect their approval or which company we recommend. Marijuana and alcohol use, that's lifestyle as well. And we'll go over marijuana in the next slide. When we are talking about underwriting here, we are talking about life insurance primarily. This whole talk is going to be pretty much about life insurance, but disability looks at these information as well, and long-term care. They're also going to order the motor vehicle report. Car accidents are actually a very common cause of death in people under the age of 40. So what they're looking for are any DUIs or multiple speeding tickets. And foreign travel. Now, depending on the company, foreign travel has always been a little bit of an issue depending on where you go, but especially with COVID, this has dramatically changed, and I'll go over that in a minute as well. So before COVID, the quickest changing thing in underwriting was marijuana usage. Okay. As of January of this year, there are 11 states that have legalized recreational use. 26 states have undergone some sort of decriminalization of marijuana, and 47 states have approved some sort of legislation regarding allowing medical use. Now, how is it underwritten? Because we get that question a lot. Well, similar to alcohol, to make an assessment, we're going to need to know how often they use marijuana, how much, and in what form. People say, what form? What do you mean by that? Well, do you use edibles? Do you smoke it? Do you vape? Marijuana comes in so many different forms now. And we're also going to need to know the last time they used it and the reason. Is it recreational or is it medical use? And depending on those answers, you could get Preferred Plus to decline. Some companies, you smoke one joint in the past year, you're getting smoker rates. Others are not as concerned about marijuana usage unless you use it many times a month. So the underwriting guidelines are very different from company to company. So we need to know this information, these details up front so we can find the best company for that particular client. And when it comes to underwriting for marijuana, it doesn't matter what state you live in. They're not going to say, oh, Jenny, you live in Florida and it's not legal there for recreational use. They're not going to, look poorly on that any more than somebody who lives in Colorado where it is legal. And the reason being is marijuana is still against federal law. So everybody is underwritten the same way. Now let's talk about foreign travel, because some of these underwriting guidelines, when I talk about COVID, these are changing on a daily basis. So I'm telling you what we know today. That doesn't mean that it won't change next week, depending on the companies, because it's a quickly changing thing. Now, when it comes to foreign travel, the typical questions we ask are where, how long, and the purpose of the travel. And the reason being is because going to London for a week-long vacation is going to be looked at very differently than going to Botswana to work in a village for a mission trip. okay? The reason being, well, health concerns, okay? In Botswana, do you have access to clean water? There could be sanitation issues. If you were to get sick or injured, what sort of health care do you have available to you? And you may also be exposed to a lot of other diseases that we don't have in the United States. The other thing that they look at when it comes to foreign travel is safety, okay, is civil unrest. Depending on where you're going, Americans could be a target for kidnapping, okay? You may not be used to the culture. And if you're not used to the culture there, you could put yourself in a dangerous situation. Now, typically, most companies are fine with level 1 and level 2 um, uh, from the State Department. You know, countries are put on different levels. Now, level 1 is exercise normal precautions, right? So you travel anywhere, you should have certain precautions. Level 2 is exercise increased caution. So most companies are okay with those. It's when you start getting into level 3 and 4. Level 3 is reconsider travel, and level 4 is do not travel. Now, with the State Department right now, because of COVID, all countries are considered level 4. You can still get a plane going to another country, but the State Department is considering all countries level 4. So if a client comes to us and has intentions of doing any foreign travel anywhere, the insurance companies are basically postponing approval until they return from that trip and actually have waited at least 30, some companies are 60 days after they return, and that they have no other intentions of doing foreign travel. So it's important. I know a lot of times clients will say, well, I have a flight, I have intentions of possibly traveling in the fall. If it's not booked, the answer to that question should be no, because the insurance companies are actually it sends a real red flag, and they may be postponing it, and the client may actually be canceling the flight anyway if they have one. So foreign travel has changed dramatically in the past few weeks. Now those are the lifestyle type questions. Obviously, medical underwriting is a huge part of your final approval. Typically, you're going to need to have an exam done, okay? And what they're looking for is organ damage. So in the blood, they're going to be testing like liver function tests, kidney function tests. They'll test your cholesterol and HIV, okay? In the urine, they're going to test for nicotine and drugs. The examiner will also do blood pressure readings as well as height and weight. Now with COVID, most clients are like, okay, with social distancing, I'm not a big fan of having an examiner come into my home to do the exam. So, and I totally don't blame them, right? But that's okay, because several companies actually have lab-free options. Also, disability, in addition to life, disability has upped the amounts that you can apply for and still be lab-free. So that's good as well. SBLI is guaranteed lab-free for $500,000 and under if your age is 20 to 50. Principal typically with their accelerated process, and we'll go into more detail about accelerated underwriting, but principal typically was $1 million and lower. You may be eligible for lab free. Since COVID, they've actually changed their underwriting guidelines, and they say you can apply for up to 2.5 million if you're 40 and under, okay? And up to 2 million for people that are ages 41 to 50. But the strings attached to that is that you have had to have a physical with labs in the past 2 years, because what they're going to do is 100% of the time, if you're applying for that amount, yeah, we won't do labs, but we're going to definitely order medical records. So they're going to order medical records in lieu of doing the exam. Penn Mutual has a process where you may be eligible for up to $5 million and actually have it lab free. And they kind of do the same thing. They take a look if they can order medical records in lieu of doing an exam. And many other companies also have up to $1 million where it may potentially be lab free. So the exam companies, they're considered an essential business. They're pretty much running at 100%. So are the insurance companies. Okay. So, if anything, it's been the clients that are concerned about having an examiner come in. So there's plenty of examiners available to do the exams. And examiners, and this has always been the case, they're required to wear gloves, long sleeves, long pants, and closed-toe shoes. But now what they did with COVID is now they're requiring their examiners to wear facial protection that protects eyes, nose, and mouth. And it's not just to protect the client, it's also to protect the examiners, because the exams company is, it's a two-way street, and they're concerned about the safety of the examiners as well. Another change is that when they schedule the appointment or when they send the reminder, there's these 2 additional questions that they ask. In the last 14 days, have you had any signs of fever or respiratory distress, or have you had close contact with somebody who has? Or in the last 14 days, have you traveled to any restricted area or taken a cruise or been exposed to somebody who has? And if your answer is yes to either one of those questions, they're going to postpone the appointment for 14 days from your last exposure. So they just want to make sure that you have that kind of self-quarantine time. Now, technology has changed this industry tremendously. And underwriters can get a lot of really good information from some databases. And the first one I'd like to talk about is the prescription database. This is going to show any medications that have been filled in the past 5 years. And some of the medications are kind of color coded. Imagine a traffic light, green, yellow, red, right? So green medications would be something the underwriter is not particularly concerned about. A random antibiotic, birth control pills, maybe Tamiflu, okay? If somebody took those a year ago, they're not going to be concerned about that. If somebody's on an antibiotic now with COVID, they probably would question that. Now, a yellow medication may be something like anxiety medication, depression medication, a narcotic, pain medication. And then red medication would be something that they would probably decline the client for, like AIDS treatment or chemotherapy. In this database, they run the client's name through the database 100% of the time. So, they'll see any prescriptions that have been filled, and it shows the medication, the dates that they were filled, the doctor's name, as well as their specialty if they have a specialty. One other thing I'd like to talk about besides marijuana that's a quickly changing thing in COVID is genetics. With the growing popularity of something like 23andMe and Ancestry.com, a lot of people are doing genetic testing. And there's for the past 10, 12 years, there's been legislation in place, the Genetic Information Non-Discriminatory Act, that was in place in 2008. That basically protects people, saying that employers and health insurance companies can't discriminate based upon any sort of genetic tests. That does not include life, disability, long-term care insurance companies. So now, in reality, underwriters are not looking to give somebody a different approval than quoted due to genetic testing. They're not trying to do that. The only time that may occur is if somebody shows a high probability of a future risk, like the BRCA gene shows a high probability of somebody developing breast cancer, and testing for Hodgkin's disease. But in general, they're not looking for any sort of genetic testing. They don't even typically necessarily ask that question. Oftentimes, the only way they would find out that somebody even had genetic testing maybe if it was in their medical records. And they're actually keeping a close eye on that, the insurance companies, on any sort of legislation as far as the genetic testing and laws regarding that. Now, oftentimes they order medical records, and I like to say here, Mark and I like to say, the medical record process is the bane of our existence here. It is the longest part of underwriting. Most people think, just have the underwriter call my doctor. My doctor will tell you I'm healthy, but it doesn't work that way. All insurance companies use a third-party vendor, such as ExamOne. And all doctors, or 99.99% of all doctors in the US, use a third-party copy service to handle the medical record process. I've even tried to order records, and the medical records department at a hospital has used a third-party vendor, which seems kind of silly. Like, what's the purpose of the medical record department? So the way this process works is that if they want to order, the underwriter wants to order my doctor's records, Dr. Smith, right? They're going to send a request to ExamOne. Now, ExamOne is going to send an authorization to Dr. Smith. And this is an authorization I already signed with the application. Dr. Smith's going to send that authorization to their third-party copy service. Now, this is not a Kinko's down the street. These third-party vendors handle medical records for hundreds of thousands of doctors throughout the United States. Some of them actually say, please allow 2 to 20 days to log in the request. So you can imagine how there could be delays in this process. So once they get to my record authorization, they're going to send an invoice to ExamOne, right? Nobody's doing this for free. They want to be paid for those records. ExamOne will send payment to the copy service. Some copy services actually accept credit card payment. Others, the ExamOne may need to mail a check to the copy service. And then, and only then, are records released to ExamOne. And then they send the records to the insurance company for the underwriter to review. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of moving parts here, a lot of things that could occur that could delay the process. Some doctors require their own authorization to be signed. So sometimes we need to send that to the client as well to get that signed before they'll release records. Now, this has changed a little bit with COVID. Have found that some of the doctor's offices or some of the third-party vendors are either short-staffed or closed. I think we had one case where we were trying to see if the client could actually get access to their records through a portal because it was actually closed, so there was really no way to get those records. But in general, things have been moving very smoothly in that realm. Now, technology has changes. There's a lot of people that see their doctors, and it's part of a larger practice, so they may have a health portal. So more and more insurance companies are using this electronic health records. It either provides kind of a summary of the client's records, or it's actually giving the client can actually give access to their portal by giving their kind of username and password. Now, that may seem a little scary to have, somebody release that information or give that information to an insurance company, but keep in mind, these are the same records that they would be getting from the third-party vendor anyway. So it's the complete records. It just speeds the process up. This can take a matter of a few days instead of the typical 30 days to receive records. And more insurance companies are going in that direction. Now, I would like to mention something about doctors and underwriters because we get this question pretty frequently. Uh, if my doctor isn't worried about my cholesterol, then why is the underwriter? And the reason being is because your doctor has the luxury of keeping tabs on your health. If my cholesterol was 220 and it should be under 200, my doctor's probably going to say, Jenny, you need to do some more cardio exercise and stop eating at McDonald's, okay? And then come back in 6 months and we'll see what your cholesterol is. But the underwriter doesn't have that luxury, right? So they're taking a snapshot of your health right now and trying to determine what are the chances that this situation is going to get worse in the next 10 or 20 or 30 years, depending on the life of the policy, right? The insurance company can't raise rates as your health gets worse. So they only have this one time to take a look at your health, and then they lock in those rates for the length of the policy. So doctors treat health, underwriters are assessing risk. So even though they're both looking at the health part, they're reviewing it under a different way. Not only that, if I was applying for $3 million of life insurance, unlike my doctor, the insurance company is on the hook for $3 million. So you know they're going to be a little bit stricter than the doctor is. Then there's the Medical Information Bureau. And this is, it's the MIB, but it doesn't stand for Men in Black. This is a database that whenever you apply for insurance, health insurance, life, disability, long-term care, your name goes into this database automatically, okay? This is a database where participating insurance companies have access to this information. The purpose, well, it's twofold. One is to protect against fraud, okay? Say we have a client that applied with a different insurance company and a different agent and got smoker rates, and it was 3 times the premium they were hoping for, right? So now they're going to go to a different insurance company, a different agent, and they're going to say, no, I have never used nicotine. I have never smoked a day in my life. Okay, that second insurance company is going to see that 6 months previously the client applied and actually received nicotine rates. So it actually protects against fraud, which really protects everybody, because whenever there's fraud, right, who pays for that but all the consumers through our premium. Not only that, it makes sure that the client is not overinsured. And this is important to understand too, because a lot of people think shopping around is a good idea. And it is a good idea to shop around for quotes. But submitting multiple applications to see which approval comes back best is not a good idea. And the reason being, say I was applying for $1 million and I submitted 9 applications because, I want to shop around and see which one comes back with the best offer. The other insurance companies are going to see each other's pending application. And they're going to say, geez, potentially Jenny could place $9 million of life insurance, and she doesn't qualify for that based upon her income. She would essentially be worth more dead than alive, and no insurance company wants to be in that situation. So some insurance companies may actually say, no, we're not even going to make an offer. It actually negatively affects the underwriting process when people submit multiple applications at the same time. Now, and we feel so strongly about this that if we know a client has a pending application, we're going to say, we don't think it's a good idea for you to submit an application through us, because we don't want to negatively affect what you have going on. Now, that doesn't mean if you get an offer from that company and you're not happy with the approval, by all means, circle back and we'll see what we can do. Maybe we can do better. I don't know. But actually submitting multiple applications, it negatively affects the underwriting process. Then oftentimes a client may need to have a telephone interview with the insurance company or a third party vendor such as Exam One, especially with the accelerated process. And we'll go through some of that later on in the presentation. So the client is asked the same questions several times during this process. We ask the medical questions so we can do our pre-underwriting. If they have an exam, the examiner is going to ask the questions, or if they go through accelerated underwriting, they'll have a telephone interview. So that's kind of normal part of the process. So that's medical underwriting. Then there's some financial underwriting. Typically, your younger clients, the purpose of life insurance is income replacement, right? So there is a certain calculation based upon somebody's income. And we do have a calculator on our website, by the way, if you are unsure, the amount that you should recommend for a client to apply. So they are going to take a look at their income. And like I said, there's a certain calculation. Again, somebody who makes $25,000 a year cannot apply for $5 million. Again, they would be worth more dead than alive. There would be too much incentive for some sort of foul play. So there is a little bit of calculation. With disability insurance, there's a lot of financial underwriting because the amount you're eligible for is based upon your income. So in those situations, you need to submit taxes and pay stubs. The underwriter is also going to look at insurable interest. There needs to be, for the beneficiary, a loss. So if I'm applying for insurance, whoever I designate as my beneficiary, there needs to be some sort of loss to them if I were to die. So like spouse, children, parents, siblings, they kind of automatically have an insurable interest. Somebody who owns a business together, but a boy and girlfriend who just started dating, or my next door neighbor can't apply for insurance on me and be the beneficiary. What loss would there be if I were to die, right? A boy and girlfriend, if you're not married, the underwriter is going to come back and say, do they own a home together? If they own a home together, then there obviously is a financial loss. If they have a child together, things like that. But if they just started dating 2 weeks ago, they probably will be questioned about the insurable interest on that. And then there's a little bit of affordability. That client who makes $25,000 a year, can they really afford to, pay the premium on a $5 million policy? And if the purpose is estate protection, maybe you have a 60-year-old client that is worth, $20 million and they're trying to buy life insurance so that it can pay for estate taxes, things like that. Then they'll take a look at the net worth. And then the fourth thing that goes into assessing risk is family history. Now, when it comes to family history, they're pretty much looking for parents and siblings that have a history of cancer, heart disease, kidney disease, or stroke at a younger age. So that's pretty straightforward with that. Some, are concerned about a death prior to age 60, others or 65, others are looking even if somebody was diagnosed at a young age like that. Now, before we get into accelerated underwriting, I'd like to go over what the typical timeline is. So when you request a quote with LLIS and we do a brief phone interview and we do our pre-underwriting, that typically takes around 2 weeks, assuming the client, is moving forward quickly, right? The application and underwriting takes around 2 to 3 months, typically 3 months, especially if they're ordering medical records, before an approval is actually made. And then from issuing a policy until it's placed in force, we'll go over that in a minute, that can take about 5 to 6 weeks by itself. So as you can see here, this process can take about 4 to 5 months from the time the client first comes to us to when they have an enforced policy. And that doesn't include things like a 1035 exchange. So if a client comes to us because they're in open enrollment and they need to get a policy in 2 weeks, that typically doesn't happen. So, just make sure that you refer a client to us with plenty of time to go through the process. Other than the medical record process, the most common delay is clients not responding to our emails. We do our best to set up realistic expectations and keep things moving forward, but it can take some time. So let's go along about the accelerated process. So this is what it's going to look like. We're going to still do our quoting and our pre-underwriting because that's what we do here at LLIS. We want to find the best company at the lowest premium for your clients. So we're going to gather all that information. We're going to shop it around. Once the client decides to move forward with a particular company, if they have an accelerated process, we're going to do what's called like a drop ticket or a need ticket. We're going to send very basic information to the insurance company. What they're going to do is they're going to do an extensive phone interview. It may take about 45 minutes. They're going to ask all their health history and family history. Some insurance companies now, in lieu of doing the phone interview, actually are sending a link where the client can actually complete the application themselves in lieu of doing a phone interview. So they're moving in that direction too. But once the interview or the application is complete, they're going to run the client's name through a prescription database. That's done 100% of the time. They're going to run their name through the MIB, and then they'll go ahead and order the motor vehicle report. And if everything looks good, they're going to make an approval, no exam, no medical records, right? So this process can take a few days as compared to the 2 to 3 month normal process. Now, not everybody qualifies for this. Most companies, the insured needs to be the policy owner. Some companies allow a spouse to be the owner, but this is typically not, most companies don't allow for business insurance and things like that. So it's typically the insured's the policy owner, $1 million or less. However, previously I already explained to you how those underwriting guidelines have changed. And some of those guidelines are temporary guidelines due to COVID. So that's why it may be a good time now to apply, because in September, it may go back to just being the $1 million or less. Ages 20 to 50, some companies allow up to age 60, and in general, good health. Somebody who's had previous cancer or who had a heart attack is not going to go through accelerated underwriting. And even if a client fits this criteria, there's a certain percentage that the insurance company is going to pull out of accelerated underwriting. And they do that for their own internal auditing, okay? Because they're not having an exam, they're not seeing the medical records. So how do they really know whether this accelerated process is a good process? They could be approving clients at a much better classification than what they should be. So they do take a certain percentage that they pull out of accelerated underwriting, and they may go order labs or go order medical records or both. But if somebody does go through the accelerated process, the benefits are improved policy issue time. There's less paperwork and follow-up, and fewer requirements such as medical records and exams. And ultimately, this ends up saving a lot of time and money. So let's jump into the policy delivery. So an approval is made on the client, okay? The typical process traditionally, it goes to the issue department. They have it printed and bound with their nice cover, and they mail it to us. That can take about 2 weeks before we get it. Then we send the policy to the client asking for maybe a delivery receipt to be signed, and asking for premium. And to mail back to us. That can take about 2 weeks. And then we send it to the insurance company. So that can take an additional week or so. Okay. This is in addition to the 2 to 3 month underwriting process. Now, technology has changed this industry tremendously, as well as the policy delivery. So a lot of policies now can be e-delivered. And the way this looks is that the insurance company makes an approval. They can issue a policy in a day or two because they're not having it bound with their, nice cover. They send it to us. We can review it the same day. If it's issued correctly, we can send it to the client. They can pay with a credit card, depending on the company and the state they live in, or with electronic transfer from their checking account. They can sign it electronically. Once it's done, they can print the policy. They can save it as a PDF. So as you can see here, this process can be much quicker. And I'm a big fan of the e-delivery. And the reason being is because just because you have an approval doesn't mean the policy's in force. So the longer the underwriting process takes, or the longer the client, takes to return delivery requirements, the insurance company may say, oh, well, we now need a good health statement. And when the client signs that, they're basically vouching that they haven't had a change in their health and nothing's changed with the application, or they haven't seen a doctor during the underwriting process. If they have seen a doctor during the underwriting process, the underwriter is going to say, whoa, don't send that check in yet. And what they're going to do is they're going to run the name through the prescription database, make sure there's no medications that were newly prescribed, any sort of change in health. Now, if somebody just went to their primary care for a flu shot or, for the regular physical, the underwriter at that point will probably say, send the check in, we'll place it in force. But if the client saw their primary care because they were having heart palpitations and was referred to a cardiologist, you better believe it, that underwriter is going to say, send that check back to the client. Okay, we want to order those medical records now. And the client can be reapproved at a different classification. And again, it delays it because now they want to order those records again. So the quicker that we can go through the process, that we can place the policy, the better. With COVID, even if somebody goes through the accelerated process, more and more insurance companies right now are requiring a good health statement with the delivery of the policy, because COVID, your health can change from one day to the next. So they want to have the client vouch and sign that they haven't had a change in health during the underwriting process. So with the policy e-delivery, this can be issued and enforced in days instead of weeks, which ends up saving a lot of time and trees too. It's a greener option. So let's take a look at an example of how the accelerated process works. Here we had a client who applied for insurance, age 38, female, right? We still did our pre-underwriting, made a recommendation, and she moved forward on 7/8. So we did the express application on 7/8. She completed her interview with the insurance company on the 11th. The underwriter ran her name through the databases, ordered the motor vehicle report, made her an approval on the 19th. The policy was sent to us on the 22nd. We reviewed it, sent it to the client on the 22nd, and the client signed and paid on the 22nd, but payment was processed overnight. So it was paid and in force on the 23rd. 15 days rather than the typical 3 or 4 month process from start to finish. Our quickest accelerated underwriting was 7 days from the time we dropped the ticket to it was paid and in force. And this worked well because she was motivated and stayed on top of things. She did what she needed to do in a timely manner, and that's why this process worked so well. Now, here are things that you can do to improve the process. You can refer clients to us. with plenty of time to go through the underwriting process. You know, we have gotten approvals in a matter of 2 weeks with policies in force, but that's not typically the typical process, and we certainly can't rely on that. It's great when it happens, though. Encourage clients to be honest. The underwriting guidelines are so different for the different insurance companies, so our recommendations are only as good as the information provided to us, just like your recommendations are probably only as good as the information provided to you as financial advisors. We don't recommend shopping around. Remember, we do that for you. And they're going to see it in the MIB, and it delays the process. And again, to keep things moving forward, advisors and clients just respond to our emails quickly. Sometimes, advisors are copied on a lot of emails. If you don't see your client responding, feel free to chime in and say, hey, John, please respond to Jenny's email that you're ready to move forward. And 90% of the time, clients, oh, yeah, that sounds good. Let's move forward. So you can help in that way as well. So today we went under the underwriting process, touched on the accelerated process and how that's really good right now with COVID, and the policy delivery process and how technology has changed. Now, what are the top 10 things that make LLIS different? Well, this is one of them. Sitting in on one of our monthly webinars, we have 8 more to go this year. So if you see something that would be beneficial to you, make sure you register for it. We're not your competition. We do a lot of pre-underwriting to avoid surprises. We do our homework up front with that. We proudly sponsor these agencies or networks. We have specialists in life, disability, long-term care, annuities, and hybrids. And hopefully you all have had a chance to meet Alice. She's our secure access anytime, anywhere portal where you can keep up to date regarding your client's application process. And, we can securely share documents as well. Okay, so I have some questions here. Let me see where. How do they check for truthfulness of answers? That's a good question, because a lot of people think that, well, I can just, not be honest about things. It's amazing with the databases, with the prescription database, we can find out a lot of really good medical information from that, as well as medical records. So rather than going through the 2 to 3 month underwriting process to find something out that they were hiding, it's just better to tell us up front, and we'll find the best company for you. Same thing about nicotine in the urine. They test nicotine, they test for THC and other drugs as well. So there are ways of finding out if somebody's being truthful. Is it going to catch it 100% of the time? Probably not, but with the databases, there's a lot of ways of finding out if somebody's not being honest. If someone dies while under the influence of marijuana but did not disclose in underwriting, what happens to life insurance payments? That's a really good question. First of all, kind of like with foreign travel, okay? If somebody was not using marijuana, did not use marijuana when they applied for insurance, that was honest at the time. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't smoke later on. Just like foreign travel, they may say no to foreign travel, but you're not going to be penalized if a year later you go to Europe, okay? If the first 2 years of any life insurance policy, there's a contestability period. So if somebody lied about something on the application and died due to that lie, they can actually not pay the death claim. They would return any paid premiums, but they would not pay a death claim. For instance, if somebody had a heart attack 6 months after applying for insurance, and didn't disclose that they had a heart attack a year prior to applying for insurance in those type of situations. After the 2-year period, it doesn't matter anyway. So it's just the first 2 years of the policy. So they would definitely pay that death claim. I have a client that wants to apply for 20-year term, 1.5 million. Should he do it now or wait? I would do it now. They are being more relaxed on underwriting regarding the exam. Even if somebody needs to have an exam, they can at least start ordering medical records. And some of the companies, like I said, are ordering medical records in lieu of the exam. But if they still want the exam, the client can apply or can schedule an exam for like the end of May or the beginning of June. I always recommend, if one is required, to go ahead and schedule it, because you can always postpone it. My concern is, if they don't schedule it, is that when everything is lifted with this social distancing, then and they need to have an exam, it may be difficult to get one. So, because insurance companies, and again, this is changing every single day. Depending on their age as well, we're finding insurance companies that will not underwrite life insurance on anyone over age 70, even if they're in their 60s, depending on their health, and even lower than that. We're also finding one company that has come out that will postpone an offer on anyone who has any sort of respiratory disorder or cardiac issues, because even though they don't have COVID, if they were to get it, they're at a much higher risk. But we still have other companies that are underwriting those. So the underwriting guidelines are changing daily. So, bear with us during this process. But if they need life insurance, absolutely, now's the time to apply. The MIB information, and how it works was very helpful. Oh, thank you. That wasn't a question. Is it multiple, or how would only asking for 2 affect you? Just thinking about how long it takes to go through the approval process. I'm not quite sure I understand that question. So I'll skip over that and email that person, that advisor. Only certain insurance companies offering the accelerated process. Any reason to believe that insurance pricing during the COVID is reflected in the fact fewer companies are willing to qualify this way? No, they have, whether you go through accelerated underwriting or not, it doesn't matter. The premium is the same. It's what it's doing for the insurance company, and the reason why they're doing the accelerated underwriting is because most insurance companies, it takes 5 to 7 years of premiums, of receiving premiums, okay, before they even break even on that policy. And the reason being, think about it. They're paying for the exam, they're paying for medical records, they're paying for the underwriter, they're paying commissions, they're paying the home office overhead. So the reason why they rolled out the accelerated process is to save some money. So they're saving the money that way by not ordering the exam and the medical records. So they're not saying, hey, if you go through accelerated underwriting, we're going to, charge you a little bit more for that convenience. It doesn't work that way. So whether you go through accelerated or not, it's the same premium. With family history, how do they view half siblings? It's hard to know if somebody has a family history. If you had a half sister that had breast cancer and a mom that had breast cancer and the mom was the same mother, they would look at it that way. But it is difficult. The majority of insurance companies would have a difficult time, trying to justify whether that's really part of your family history. And most of the time it's parents, because if somebody's 35 applying for life insurance, your half sibling is probably going to be pretty young too. So they're, looking more at parents. How about celebratory cigars? We had a client who recently applied and had a cigar with a friend like 1 to 2 times a year. So if somebody uses cigars, and we're very detailed in the questions that we ask about cigar use and the last time you used it. If you use a celebratory cigar 1 or 2 a year, that's typically not a problem at all with the majority of insurance companies. You still have to test negative for nicotine in the system. I always tell clients if I'm interviewing around Christmas time or something, the holidays, like I see that you smoke cigars, don't smoke one right before the exam because they are going to test for nicotine. And when you test positive for nicotine, there's no way to tell if that nicotine's from a cigar versus whether it's coming from cigarettes. Nicotine is nicotine, right? So they can't tell the difference. So, of course, they're going to err on the side if somebody did test positive for nicotine, that they would be classified as a smoker. We do have some companies that are very lenient on cigar smoking too, like even frequent cigar smoking. Do you use electronic signatures for binding insurance? What is the process like? Sometimes we find that part to be the worst part, as a lot of insurance companies seem to still do a lot of mail physical signatures. Some of the companies do allow to bind it with an electronic signature. Typically, we don't do the temporary insurance. Reason being is that, first of all, that's a misnomer in a sense. Like some insurance companies, they call it temporary insurance, and it is temporary insurance if the client were to die during the underwriting process, but assuming they would have approved the client. If they're in the process of ordering medical records and they found out that the client had COVID or something, or had a heart attack 2 months ago and would have never approved that person, they wouldn't pay that claim anyway. And the temporary insurance is only good for, typically, depending on the insurance company, maybe 2 months or 3 months. Well, the underwriting process can take longer than that. So what they end up doing is returning that premium anyway, and you still go through underwriting. It can sometimes muddy the waters. I mean, we have done it, but in general, the majority of our cases, we don't do that. Very good presentation. Do you have access to North American life insurance? No, we currently are not, working with North American. They may possibly be, I don't know. I'm not 100% familiar with them, but they may be a captive agent where you have to only work for them. I'm not sure. If a client has stopped smoking but is on the nicotine patch, are their companies harsh on that process? Again, nicotine in your system, whether it's from a patch, whether it's from gum, is nicotine in your system. If it's disclosed upfront to us that somebody uses a nicotine patch, there are 1 or 2 companies we can go to and get non-smoker rates for the client, even though they test positive for nicotine. They need to disclose that upfront though. And that way we can just move forward with that one or 2 companies that are lenient with that. And yeah, so the underwriting guideline is so different for every single insurance company. And so that's why, with working with so many different insurance companies, we usually can find a really good option for your clients. You know, compared to a lot of agents. But again, I think, okay, we need an LLIS for auto, home, and umbrella insurance. Thank you. Yeah, right now we're only dealing with, because you can imagine we process our business in every state in the country, and so as it is, trying to keep track of the paperwork with that alone, trying to deal with auto or health insurance, on top of that would be a little crazy for us. But thank you for that compliment. And let me see. Okay, I think that's it. So if you guys have any more questions, I can respond via email to you, and it was a pleasure speaking with you. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to email me. Thank you.